An all-day session was held at the Belize Biltmore Plaza Hotel in Belize City, where 90 legal minds were catered for. It was a conference that saw presentations on the Belize Guatemala referendum as they discuss when and how do we draw the lines. The conference was organized by the Belize Bar Association with help from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We spoke with the president of the Belize Bar Association, Ms. Jacqueline Marshallek.
The purpose behind the conference is essentially to educate attorneys on the issue of the Belize Guatemala dispute. I think there's an assumption that because we are attorneys, we are all comfortable and knowledgeable on international law and the details of this dispute. There's an expectation, I do believe, by the public, since the dispute touches on legal affairs, that we will be able to advocate and explain. And I think that that's a fair expectation of us as an association and as advocates. But in order to do that properly, we need to have that information, and we need to be properly educated ourselves so that when we go out to assist perhaps in explaining or educating things to the general public, to our family, to our friends, that we make sure we don't provide wrong information or we miscommunicate something because we're picking it up from sources or places that may not necessarily be proper. So the idea is to put our attorneys in a position where they have access to persons who know about this topic in detail and in depth, and hopefully they will learn from this experience and then be able to assist others. Each year we have different topics. Generally we will try to choose topics from both the criminal law and from the civil law, because we have practitioners in different areas of law, and in order to get everybody together and willing to sit through a day's conference, we try to do a myriad of topics. But this particular topic touches everybody, criminal, civil. It touches everybody who's a Belizean citizen, everybody who's a Belizean resident, anybody who loves Belize. So we thought this would be a good topic that would certainly attract attorneys.
Dr. Asad Schumann was one of the 5 presenters at today's conference. His presentation took an in-depth look at how far we have come since 2000 in the facilitation process, including the Heads of Agreement and the Maritime Areas Act. He also looked at where we go from here with an aim at putting the dispute to an end.
As I said, I think that we need to, as I said, take back the agenda, take back the initiative. I think that for the last few years, Guatemala has been pushing the envelope. They've been saying what we should do and what we should. Well, they said, first of all, we shouldn't go to referendum. We can't go to referendum. They keep postponing dates. And then they came up with this idea of let's get a little more cozy. Sign agreements between ourselves and we get to trust each other more, and it'll be more likely for us to go to referendum. I don't think that's true. So I think we need to take back the initiative and decide ourselves what we're going to do to push this thing forward and to finally end that claim of Guatemala to Belize.
I don't think it's a question of going backwards. I think the question is far more important is where are we going? One, I think the SARS-2 has become a problem and we need to deal with that. The suggestion from Asad, which I think we all agree with, is that we may need new confidence building measures for the SARS-2, one specially designed for the SARS-2. Then after that, the question is how do we get to the ICJ if that is what the people in Guatemala and the people in Belize want? My view has been that we need to build confidence on both sides of the borders. We have to become good neighbors. Guatemala has to stop doing the illegal things that it is doing, because many of its people who come across with impunity, and Guatemala does very little about it. So to put it very succinctly, we need the circumstances that are going to be conducive for both sides to vote yes in a referendum, because I think we all agree that we will never have a negotiated settlement. It's just now for the people to decide whether they want to go to the court or not. If that is what we want, it can only be done if people believe that Guatemala will implement the result, because we will win.
Dr. Herman Bird presented in Session 4, which dealt with the implementation and enforcement of the ICJ decisions, as well as the challenges and justiciability. He spoke to Love News and gave examples of other nations who have gone to the International Court of Justice.
What I'm looking at is how states have complied with the ICJ decisions. Once a ruling has been handed down, you know that it's valid and it's legally binding, and so then they have to look at how they go about enforcing it. And particularly during the period 1987 to 2003, there have been about 3 or 4 cases where they have accepted the ruling initially after it was addressed, but then they have problems complying with it and enforcing it and working it out. And so it's just to give a sense that the ruling is not really a magic one, and the problem simply evaporates. That then you then have to sit down and work out how you're going to implement the ruling, especially if it involves issues with land or issues with sea, that sort of thing. As I say, it's binding to the states that are party to the dispute, and so then they have to find a way of enforcing it. And the responsibility really rests upon the states. They can reach out to international organizations, like for example the Organization of American States. They can reach out to the United Nations to help if they run into problems, for example, of mapping and surveying the borders, things like that. They can reach out to various organizations, but essentially it falls to the state to find a way to work and implement this treaty. The ICJ, as I understand it, is the judicial arm of the United Nations, and so there is a provision in the Charter where countries can, if a particular state is recalcitrant, and that forwarding can register a complaint to the Security Council and ask for their intervention, and that's something that they would take under consideration and may or may not give it. I don't know of a case where they have. Complaints have been made. So in my presentation I will be discussing the El Salvador Honduras border dispute and talk about some of the problems they experience trying to implement the judgment.
Other issues dealt with looked at the alternative to the ICJ, being the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The senior legal counsel for that entity, Garth Schofield, spoke on the experiences of the PCA when it comes to international boundary delimitation. Dr. Schumann applauded the Belize Bar Association for this conference, but added that it is the responsibility of Belizeans to get involved.
It's not just the Bar Association. All citizens of Belize have a responsibility. The government has to provide the enabling environment for this to happen. It has primary responsibility. As I said, it has to act with or without the support of the opposition to defend the sovereignty of Belize. But that's why I mentioned in my talk that I am very impressed and I'm very happy to see that manifesto commitment in the UDP manifesto, which is presumably now in force for the next 5 years, which says that they will in effect colonize the border. They will put a road right along the border. They will encourage farming, enterprise, investment, people working there, employment right along the western border. It's a fantastic idea, long overdue. Let's hope it gets done as a priority in this government, and this will emphasize that belongs to us.
The session ran up until 5 o'clock this evening and had the presence of the Foreign Affairs Minister Wilfred Elrington, as well as his Chief Executive Officer Lawrence Sylvester and the Director of Public Prosecutions Charlene Vidal and the Brigadier General David Jones.